Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Ashley Brewer, I am the Senior Web and User Experience Librarian, as Ben said, at VCU Libraries. So I supervise the library's web team there and do user experience research to try and ensure that our web properties and our digital experiences and web applications are as maximally useful for our VCU users, particularly students, as possible. I'm going to talk about, it's all the dark web, dark patterns, data privacy, and the myth of the internet connection. As Ben alluded, mean dark web a little bit differently, but also kind of not. We'll get into that a little bit more as we get into the talk. The outline for this evening, this is kind of what we're going to cover. First, kind of want to scope out a bit and talk about what does it mean to connect? What is connection? What does that mean now? And then we'll talk about what are called dark patterns. I'll give you a definition of what that is, and we'll look at some definitions and examples. And then we'll talk a little bit about data privacy, why it matters, and how to protect yours, focusing a little bit more on some things that I think are less talked about in terms of how we interact with the web, rather than just things like strong passwords and stuff like that. And then kind of scope back out again and maybe end on a bit of a philosophical note, if you will indulge me, talking about ways that we can reconnect with each other using the web and also despite how our online lives have kind of evolved these days. But first, a little story. This is a picture of my parents and my 4-year-old in Monterey, California, where I grew up. I was there a couple months ago, or a month or so ago, for my dad's birthday. One evening, after putting my daughter to sleep, my parents and I were up together chatting. And I forget how the topic came up, except that the topic of the internet and AI and just a general feeling of dread about all of it seems to kind of come up in conversation pretty frequently, I think, with a lot of people these days. But somehow the topic of AI taking over the world came up, and I made some disparaging remark about AI being a scam and a solution to a problem that doesn't exist or something to that effect. At any rate, it was meant to be like a flippant comment because I was very tired, too tired to have a substantive conversation, hashtag mom life. But that did spark a debate with my parents about the helpfulness of Google's new-ish AI integration, their AI overview. That's the thing that comes up when you do a Google search and you see this kind of AI summary come up of answers and results. My mom insisted that she had found it helpful. And why shouldn't it be more useful than someone without a lot of knowledge of how to verify sources or do quality research trying to skim the top results themselves? My mom herself being a retired librarian. My dad and I cited the many times we had personally encountered the Google AI overview being straight up wrong sometimes, or of it at least not being even a more simplified answer than just skimming the top results. And to me and my dad's credit with that point, as you can see in this example, hopefully, where the Google AI overview overstates its own inaccuracy, i.e. it gives a wrong answer about itself that actually makes it look worse than it is. I think my dad and I were maybe onto something. Anyway, I attempted in that conversation, tiredly and probably not very well, to try and explain how generative AI and large learning models, which train AIs, actually work, and how at a certain point AIs are just learning from each other, the whole kind of garbage in, garbage out concept. I talked about the environmental impact of AI data centers, how people have literally been driven insane by ChatGPT. A very interesting article about that in the New York Times recently. Anyway, I'm afraid I was not painting a very optimistic picture. And my mom started to get frustrated with me. And she finally just said, oh, well, great, what can we do? What can we do about this? That's just the way things are now. But despite the dark picture I had painted, I was also adamant that it didn't have to be this way. about AI or even the internet in general, that we have more control over how we interact with these tools and how we use them, that we have more choice in whether we opt in or out. And that despite large companies currently going all in on AI, consumers can still just reject it, not opt in. There are options. And that, believe it or not all folks who work in technology are AI enthusiasts, like myself, and some are even some of the biggest AI skeptics or alarmists and are working very hard from the inside to push back on not just AI, but many dehumanizing trends in web technology. My mom was still skeptical, but I think she seemed a little bit more hopeful that I refused to be skeptical. And while this talk is actually not about AI, like at all, like this is the only time I'm going to mention it except to opine a bit at the end. I do think this, well, it's kind of like not addressing the elephant in the room to give a tech talk these days and not like mention AI. It's sort of like an obligation. But also I feel like the story kind of gets at what I hope will be the main takeaway for this talk, which is that I know it can kind of feel hopeless, like all this stuff is sort of bigger than us and it's kind of going in a particular direction whether we want it to or not. But the things that we do have, I think, more consequence than some of us may think, and we have a bit more control than I think a lot of us understand or believe in how we interact with the internet, how we shape the internet, and how we shape our own relationship with technology and how technology works moving forward. So before we go into specifics, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of connection itself. So way back in the year 2000, which as a millennial I refuse to admit was 25 years ago, political scientist Robert D. Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone: The Collapse and Revival of American Community. In the book, Putnam describes all the ways in which Americans used to build and foster community and socialize in person, to educate and enrich our social lives, and how these forms of civic engagement, such as social clubs, volunteer opportunities, civic associations, etc., are vital to a strong democracy and have seen a steep decline ever since the 1950s. Putnam used bowling as an example to illustrate this because although the number of people who bowled had increased in the last 20 years at the time of the book, the number of people who bowled in leagues had decreased. This type of community building and civic engagement, being part of shared interest groups, be they hobbies or living in proximity, and how to improve communal quality of life, is vital to individual well-being and to a strong democracy because it helps increase two types of what Putnam calls social capital. Bonding type social capital, which increases bonds within a demographic group, so like-minded folks, similarly raised folks, and crucially for a strong democracy and to reduce hyperpolarization, sound familiar? A bridging type of social capital that helps bond people from different groups. Again, this book was written 25 years ago. Throughout the book, he cites a number of possible reasons for this sharp decline in civic engagement, from suburbanization to women entering the workforce, LOL. But he refutes each one of these as being the main drivers for, with abundant counter evidence. He concluded that the main driver was technology individualizing people's leisure time, in particular television and the internet. In other words, people spending more time watching TV or scrolling the internet than interacting with each other. He even goes on to speculate that virtual reality helmets would only increase this in the future. 25 years later, and it doesn't feel like we've learned much, does it? Rather than start up bowling leagues or joining running clubs or social clubs or our local parent-teacher association, most of us hopped onto chat rooms, message boards, forums, and then social media, which we even began to rely on for our consumption of news. And now, politically in the United States, polarization is among the highest it appears to have been perhaps since the Civil War, with folks who have very unfavorable opinions of the opposing political party at record high as of 2022, according to The Economist. And an American Psychiatry Association poll in January of 2024 found that 30% of American adults reported feeling lonely at least once a week, with 10% reporting feeling lonely every day, with this being even worse with young people, with 30% of 18 to 34-year-olds saying they felt lonely every single day or at least multiple times a week. And as a web designer and developer, I have to agree with Dr. Robert that the internet and digital technologies aren't the only drivers of this trend, but sure are very big ones, and they're not helping. So we don't like each other, we don't trust each other, we don't trust the news. How did we get here? How do tech companies and the internet sow distrust, coerce and take advantage of consumers, as well as heighten our polarization and sense of personal isolation? And most importantly, what can we do about it? One way that tech companies and the internet sow distrust and take advantage of users to maximize profits is through what are called dark patterns. According to Dr. Harry Brignall, a user experience or UX designer and the founder of the Deceptive Patterns Initiative at Expert Witness, and actually the one who coined the term dark patterns, so why not go with his definition? He defines a dark pattern as a type of user interface that appears to have been carefully crafted to trick users into doing things that are not in their interest and usually at their expense. You've probably looked at a bank statement and been surprised to see a new subscription that you've been charged for the last 3 months and don't remember signing up for or haven't really used. Or you find advertisements following you across the web, becoming increasingly specific to things that you were just talking about. And it probably won't surprise you that this is by design. And for those of you who aren't surprised, who are saying, well, duh, of course these companies are all trying to maximize profits and get me to spend money, I go into my interactions with most websites expecting it. To you all, I would say 2 things. The first is, great, you're savvy. But believe it or not, not all companies operate this way, encouraging designers to employ deceptive design patterns. And besides advocating for regulation to maybe make intentionally designing dark patterns illegal, which is a thing, and we'll talk about in a moment, you could also exercise consumer choice by only shopping with companies that embrace transparency in their design and dealings. The second thing I would say is that no matter how cynical or savvy you are, it is surprisingly easy to fall for a dark pattern because there are so many ways that they can show up, and they are so common. So what are some examples of dark patterns? I'm going to take us through about 10, not about 10, examples of dark patterns, how to recognize them, how to avoid them, or at least how to recognize them and interact with them thoughtfully, as well as end with some efforts that are taking place to eliminate the use of dark patterns in design. So the first one is called the bait and switch. The old bait and switch. It's when companies will bait users into clicking on buttons they think will lead them to certain pages or initiate a specific action, only for something unexpected to happen instead. A pretty famous example of this was when Microsoft had Windows customers try to close a pop-up. Just bear with me. What does this usually mean to most of you, this red X? Yeah. It doesn't mean initiate download immediately, usually, right? Well, guess what? Microsoft decided for this software update that it did. And folks were pretty upset about this. But yeah, in this example, they had it so that you click that no thanks button, or what you think is a no thanks button, and it actually initiated an immediate software update. This is a common dark pattern that you'll mostly encounter when like a company or website is prioritizing sales or signups. They'll make it really hard for you to get out of that, or make it so that something you might click to kind of get out of that will still kind of push you toward signing up or buying something. This is one of the hardest ones to avoid if you encounter it, because it is specifically designed to make you do something. The only thing I can really say with this one is, and spoiler alert, kind of the same for a lot of them, is just to be able to recognize them and pay attention and notice when you click on something where it's taken you. Number 2 is another very common dark pattern that many of you will most likely recognize, and it's called hidden costs. This is where the actual total you end up paying is different from what was advertised. The advertised price ends up just being this like base price, and a number of extra fees are added to the total. A lot of food delivery companies use this, as well as like hotel, car rental, and flight booking services, where they say this is the price, and then you get to the end and realize like that's $150 more than you told me it was going to be. A lot of these companies they're banking on hoping that you won't even notice this is happening, but they're also banking that even if you do notice, by the time you've gone through the whole process, you'll just kind of be like, whatever, I can't be bothered with this anymore, and you'll just accept it. Again, the only thing to really kind of do with this is notice it, make sure you're always double checking your cart and seeing what the actual total is, so you're at least not surprised. And then maybe do another search if you really don't want to pay that extra $150. Here's another one that I'm sure many of you have encountered. It's called forced continuity. Forced continuity takes place when a company tricks you into entering your payment details to sign up for a free trial, only to start billing you as soon as that free trial ends with no warning. Now, this is a dark pattern that is so common, you're probably thinking, is there even a company that offers a free trial without making me enter my payment details first? Because almost all of them seem to do this. But the fact is, it doesn't have to be this way. There isn't actually anything stopping a company from simply shutting off your access to the site with an email registration after your free trial has ended, and then like sending you an email saying, I hope you enjoyed your free trial. Would you like to pay money to sign up for this? Subscriptions start at $7.99 a month. Or something to that effect. And nothing stopping them except their own greed, of course. The Amazon subscription model is another really famous example of this. The whole users will click to subscribe and save for a cheaper price, unaware that Amazon will just automatically reorder it for them if they subscribe and save. This is a hard one to avoid because, again, like I said, it seems like pretty much every company just goes ahead and offers their free trials with taking your credit card information first. In this case, I would say, if you really want to take advantage of a free trial, set a reminder for yourself on your phone or your calendaring app of choice to give you an alert like the day before the trial is set to end. Some companies are like a little bit more ethical with this, where they will send you an email saying, your free trial is about to end, we're going to start charging you. But honestly, I would not rely on a company that employs the goodwill of a company that employs this dark pattern. So if you really want to give that thing a free trial, protect yourself by making sure that you're being proactive with setting reminders. This is a fun one with a fun name, the Roach Motel. So let's say you actually do want to sign up for something, or let's say you accidentally signed up for something because the company made signing up too easy. But just signing up was too easy. However, canceling seems to be almost impossible. This is another deceptive design tactic called the Roach Motel, because you can get in, but you can't get out. Common versions of this include making you contact support to cancel instead of being able to do it yourself, which for millennials and younger, we're allergic to calling people on phones, so that's really difficult for us. Or just giving you or just making the cancel option hidden under just so many clicks that it's just very difficult to find. Again, there's not a really easy way to avoid this one except to persevere if you want to cancel, and to keep in mind that this particular company uses this dark pattern, so maybe you can not deal with them in the future. Number 5, another common one, sneak into basket. This one pretty much does what it says on the box. It's when a company defaults to adding items that you didn't select into your basket. Think defaulting to adding optional insurance for a car rental, or in the example above, this is like a domain registration. So if you're going to make a website or buying a personal website, this one defaults to 5 years of registration, which it doesn't need to do. You can choose a littler option, but it defaults to 5 years. And it also adds in this optional domain name privacy for an additional $49.95, which again is an option. It's not something that's required. And this is another part of this dark pattern, is it sometimes isn't clear if the thing that's been snuck into the basket is optional or not. So again, they're hoping that you either won't notice or you'll think like, oh, kind of like the hidden cost, if I want this, I have to have this as part of it. And it's usually not the case. This is another one where the only real strategy is to just know that this is a thing, recognize it, again, like double check your cart, double check your options before you check out. Number 6 is confirm sharing, shaming. Confirm shaming uses clever and or emotionally manipulative language to shame users for opting out or declining a service. And it aims to guilt trip you into changing your mind. For example, the opt-out button on a newsletter pop-up might read, "No thanks, I don't want amazing deals in my inbox," rather than a simple "no thanks." And when worded like this, the alternative sounds much more desirable, like, I don't know, maybe I do want amazing deals in my inbox. Or in this case, I do want 30% off, even if I don't want another credit card that I don't need, which is what it takes to get this 30% off in this case. Number 7 is misdirection. Misdirection distracts the user from the task at hand by encouraging them to focus on something different. So in this example, this aviation company is distracting the user from selecting their own seats or opting out of the selection altogether with a bright banner that lets you know that they've pre-selected seats for you for a price, for money. This is another one where the only real strategy besides trying to develop brand loyalty with companies that don't do this is to be aware and double check everything before you enter payment information and just make sure you're checking what your actual options are, not what the company is pushing you to do. Number 8, disguised ads. This is one of the most common dark patterns on free sites. When you visit a page, ads may be disguised as something else, like an article or news item, or placed in a way that makes them hard to distinguish from the real content. You usually won't realize it's an ad until you've clicked on it. This is Softpedia. It's a popular software download site. It often uses disguised ads on their software download page to boost ad revenue. And their approach involves displaying advertisements with a prominent download button that closely resembles the actual download button for the software, leading users to understandably mistakenly click on the ad thinking they're downloading the software. Again, unfortunately, like just being careful is really the only strategy here, but this one's a really important one to be mindful of because this one can be pretty dangerous in terms of data privacy if it's attached to a phishing scheme or could get you to download a virus. So another thing you want to always do whenever you click on something is double check your URL in the browser when you click a link to make sure you haven't clicked into a completely different website. So if you're on like Softpedia and you click a link, are you still in Softpedia or are you on virus.phishing.malware.org? Number 9 is FOMO, or fear of missing out. This is used on a lot of e-commerce sites, shopping websites, to pressure users into quick purchases by including information about how many people have bought it or are intending to buy it. And they've bought it like in the last hour. So it gives users the impression that the item is in really high demand, and if they don't act now, they're going to miss their chance to get these really cool slippers. And then the last one that I want to talk about is called price comparison prevention. Comparing the prices of similar items is a common step in any user purchasing journey. Some websites automatically show similar products for an easy price comparison, but others will intentionally hide or obscure pricing information to dissuade users from choosing the cheaper alternative. So like this is an example from LinkedIn where they show all of these different membership options, but they make you click into each one, or in some cases with some companies, you have to actually call their sales department to get pricing information, rather than just letting you see the benefits and the price right there at a glance yourself. So other than just some of the recognize these and be aware. What can we do about patterns, dark patterns? Well, like I said, a lot of what you can do like immediately is just recognize them, like hopefully this talk is helping with, so that you won't fall for them. But unfortunately, as you've seen, they're very common. But there are other things you can do. You can advocate for legislation to make dark patterns illegal or at least discouraged. And if you think that's pie in the sky, well, California has already done it to a large extent. One of State Attorney General Javier Becerra's last acts before leaving office to run the Department of Health and Human Services was to add regulations around dark patterns to the state's Consumer Privacy Act in 2021. Among other things, this banned dark patterns designed to make it difficult for consumers to exercise some of the rights that the law provides, like opting out of the sale of their data. It banned dark patterns, including forcing users to click through multiple screens, scroll through lengthy privacy policies, urging them not to opt out, or using confusing language. Washington State has made many attempts to pass similar privacy laws and has made some progress in making dark patterns illegal when it comes to health data. And federal lawmakers are also paying attention to dark patterns, and there have been some efforts there as well. At a House Energy and Commerce Committee meeting hearing a number of years ago about social media and disinformation, Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware asked big tech CEOs Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey if they would oppose legislation that banned dark patterns that tricked users into giving away their data. This data, she said, was often used in algorithms that targeted people who are especially susceptible to misinformation, like seniors, children, folks with less formal education, and also just all of us. And then in 2021, that Congress member introduced the DETOR, the Deceptive Experience to Online Users Reduction Act. Which was the House version of a bill of the same name that Senators Deb Fischer, Republican of Nebraska, and our own Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, introduced in 2029. As of January 2025, the reintroduced bills are dead and they haven't made progress. But I think just knowing that this is on folks' radar, I hope is encouraging in the sense that this is something to kind of elevate if it's something that matters to you. And because of the nature of the internet, it really only takes legislation happening somewhere for it to happen everywhere, because websites are typically global. The reason, for example, that we all have to click on accept, reject, or customize cookies now is not because of an American law, but because of a European law. The EU passed a data privacy law requiring it for websites, and it was too much of a pain for most companies to just implement this for European IPs. So as a result, it is now effectively a requirement everywhere and a power that all internet users have to be able to customize their privacy and their cookies in this way. Another thing you can do is you can just help spread the word about dark patterns and examples of dark patterns and shame companies that use them on your own reviewing or social media platform of choice. A really great resource that I like, which is what this screenshot is here, is hallofshame.design. It's where examples of dark patterns and the companies that use them are highlighted. So consumer pressure is a powerful tool. A lot of designers like myself are actually the ones calling out and recognizing dark patterns. This site is maintained by other designers who are basically saying, don't do this. But because they know it's bad user experience and it's unethical, and it can erode consumer trust. So even from a business perspective, there are folks who recognize that short-term wins might help with the immediate bottom line, but they don't spell longevity like long-term loyalty and long-term brand loyalty, which is built on trust, which dark patterns negatively affect. And most companies really, really don't like being called out. So it's a powerful tool. So with that, I'm going to kind of segue into talking about data privacy and why it matters and how to protect yours. And I think most people are aware of issues of data privacy in terms of security and identity theft, and that having strong passwords can help protect their data. And I think when most of us think about data privacy or security, we're worried about being scammed out of money, or our social security number being stolen, or our bank account hacked into, because those are scary things. But there's more at stake than that, particularly in an existential way. So I'm not actually going to spend a lot of time talking about like password security or phishing scams or not clicking on suspicious links. All this stuff is really important, but I think there's a lot of information and awareness about that stuff right now. And if you work for a large company, chances are your IT team has already made you go through a mandatory training about some of these things. And just it's not, there's a lot of information about that kind of way of protecting your data privacy. I want to talk more about the stakes when it comes to letting browsers and apps track our information. And when we let ourselves engage, quote unquote, in online discourse or rage bait. But first I'm going to do that kind of dangerous thing for a live presentation where I'm going to try and play a video. We did test this, but I have to make my mouse, oh, there it is, okay. I think we're going to make this work.
Many people are finding meaning outside their day jobs by spending their leisure time volunteering for large tech companies. This includes engaging with targeted content on social media, viewing advertisements, and sharing their personal data, all while receiving zero compensation for their work. Why do you do this?
It's just a really nice way to turn my brain off after work.
Macy, who works full-time at a small advertising company, donates most of her free time to an app called Instagram, which benefits off her time and contributions. How many hours a day do you spend volunteering for these tech companies?
My screen time is about 9 hours.
Wow, that must make you feel really good about yourself.
Oh no, it makes me feel way worse.
It's unclear what meaning she and others derive from this unconventional form of volunteering, but despite that, there seems to be no sign of slowing down, especially among children. While some countries are putting limits on social media, tech companies in the US have welcomed this trend as it provides them with valuable user data, increased engagement, and insights into consumer behavior. Will this trend continue to grow, or will it transform into new forms of uncommodified labor?
So yeah, I don't know about you, but I felt really called out and like personally attacked when I saw that video for the first time. But like what really is the harm in letting ourselves be tracked in browsers and across apps and in social media? I mean, like, I'm not running for office. I don't have anything to hide. Like, why should I care? You know, some other country like learn some information about me. Well, for a number of reasons. Besides the ones I've already mentioned regarding identity and financial data, et cetera, your data in terms of what you like, what stimulates you, what you engage with, it is powerful stuff for tech companies. This fuels what ads track you across sites, what businesses know about you, and some of it might be nice or convenient or seem nice or convenient, like having your passwords saved, having to browse less because you're being fed products and information that do actually interest you the most. It gives the illusion of saving you time when what it's really doing is drawing you in to spend more time to a given site or app. And this all has a cost. It has a personal cost and it has a social cost. Like this, in this year's Read Up Richmond book, My Documents, you might not think you have anything to hide or any reason to be a target, but you also don't ever know. As long as you're willingly allowing yourself to rely on technology that can be tracked by big tech companies and the government, who are often working with said tech companies, because even when they seem at odds, like breaking up Google or Meta, the government relies on the data these companies can collect, and few contracts are as lucrative as a big government contract. I owe a lot of the next portion of this talk to a brilliant speaker and now filmmaker, David Dillon Thomas. I had the privilege of hearing him speak at a conference I co-chaired last year. At the conference, he called his talk, What If People Weren't the Product, which is a great title. But you can find the same talk or a similar talk more or less online on YouTube with a much bluer title called No Seriously F Engagement. I recommend watching it or listening to it if you have the chance or feel so inclined. But there's 2 points he highlights in particular that I want to talk about now. And the first is about polarization and information like separation. And the other is about the dangers of companies prioritizing engagement and the dangers of letting ourselves be a part of that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the dangers of allowing ourselves to have things hyper-curated or modified too tightly or specifically to our needs. This is a screenshot of an interaction I had with a friend of mine on Instagram. I shared a very funny, in my opinion, and definitely very strange video on my Instagram stories the other day, and my good friend who lives in California sent me a message saying, the content you find on the internet is very strong. And I jokingly replied, thank you, I may have cracked the algorithm from volunteering too much time to it, melty face emojis time 5. And on a previous video I had shared that was also incredibly niche, I even put as a caption, I'm ashamed of how chronically online finding this video funny makes me, but I'm a little bit proud of how I seem to have tamed this algorithm. The thing is though, I made these jokes, but this illustrates a very real social problem that I'm clearly not immune to, and I'm definitely a part of. So like, there's no judgment in this talk. We're all learning and hopefully committing to do better together by the end of this. But a problem this illustrates is us increasingly having entirely different experiences of the same thing, i.e. reality. And not because of our perceptions or the filter of our own like past or lived experiences, but because we are literally seeing different internets. Like, yes, birders are seeing different Instagram feeds from tattoo enthusiasts, and foodies are seeing different TikToks from weightlifters and dieters, and the 1 or 2 people who manage to be a Venn diagram of all of those things are seeing a different internet with the 1 or 2 content creators who somehow fulfill all of those needs. But more consequentially for our democracy, conservatives are seeing different internets than liberals, leftists are seeing different internets from both. Religious people are seeing different internets from non-religious folks. All this has very real political consequences. We've ceased to have very many common experiences, and not just of entertainment, but of reality as well. Not to be all back in my day, but I am going to do that, literally. Before the proliferation and expansion of separate streaming services for every company or channel and being able to watch anything, anytime, there were far fewer shows that played only at certain times unless you taped them, if anyone remembers that. And not everyone watched the same things, but around the water cooler the next morning, you could usually find a couple of people who had watched the latest episode of The Simpsons, or Frasier, or Seinfeld, or In Living Color, or even some of the early prestige dramas like The Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, the early days of Game of Thrones. Now I feel like it's almost impossible to find people who are watching the same things as you at the same time, because there's just so much content and you can watch it at your own pace. And you can kind of, watch it whenever. And, like my husband and I can't necessarily talk to anyone about Gardener's World with Monty Don on the BBC, just like I can't talk with any of my friends about The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives because I'm not watching it, but I do watch Dancing with the Stars, which none of them watch, which ironically has 2 women from The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on it this season. But to go back to Bowling Alone, it's gotten so bad that not only is spending too much time on TV making us lonely and disconnected from each other, but we're not even watching the same things or even like talking to each other or connecting about TV as much anymore, because there's just so much content and we're watching it at our own pace in such a form of isolation. And the same thing has very much happened with the internet, and it's been perpetuated by the internet. It used to be that a big news story would actually be a big news story, with like consequences, and linger for at least a few days, even if we were using different networks with different perspectives to consume that news. Now there's so many different perspectives claiming to be objective, as well as the ability with the internet to just constantly pump out more and more information. It's almost impossible to keep up. And news stories seem to have less consequence as a result. I consider myself a pretty informed person. I certainly want and try to be. And yet almost daily, my own husband will ask me if I've seen or heard X or Y news story that I very often haven't. And we're like pretty aligned like in interests and politics, and even we're seeing different things pushed to the top of our feeds. This is part of the danger of relying on things like Facebook for our news, of course, but also even of relying on news aggregators. Like what come out of our phones or via Google, because even if one person is reading the Wall Street Journal versus someone reading the New York Times, or someone listening to NPR, or someone reading The Economist, there may be different angles and perspectives highlighted, but at the very least, they're probably all reporting on the same events. So even that gives a better sense to us all of at least having a common experience of what's literally happening. Even if we disagree on the whys or the hows or the whether it's good or not. And so again, to go back to bowling alone, no wonder we're so polarized and no wonder we're so lonely. We don't even share the same realities in a lot of ways anymore. But okay, so what do we do about it to not be so doom and gloom? Well, in this case, like with most things, if you care about making a change, you might have to make a sacrifice, or at least a change in behavior that might feel like a sacrifice at the time. What you benefit from or perceive you benefit from in terms of convenience by having your passwords saved, or not having to hunt for funny videos or memes, but just having perfectly curated entertainment like served to you, you might have to sacrifice. But if the reasons I've already given to change behavior aren't compelling enough to you, let me share one at least very specific example of the very real harm that hyperpersonalization and uncontrolled engagement can cause. For those of you who weren't aware or need a refresher, in 2016, longstanding tensions between the minority Rohingya Muslim population in Myanmar and the nationalist Buddhist population came to a head, resulting in a genocide and persecution of Rohingya Muslims in 2017 and ongoing. That has resulted also in one of, if not the largest refugee camps in the world in Bangladesh from fleeing Rohingya Muslims. It had been well documented that a lot of hate speech and hate for Rohingya Muslims had been shared on Facebook in Myanmar that had fueled the violence. But just like Facebook did in the 2016 election in our own country, Facebook maintained that it was simply a platform and didn't actively do anything to promote misinformation or hate speech. Well, in 2022, Amnesty International found compelling evidence contradicting Facebook or Meta, the parent company, their narrative that it is simply a neutral platform that some folks misuse. And I'm going to directly quote for the next little bit the linked PBS article here about it. But a new and comprehensive report by Amnesty International states that Facebook's preferred narrative is false. The platform, Amnesty says, wasn't merely a passive site with insufficient content moderation. Instead, Meta's algorithm proactively amplified and promoted content on Facebook, which incited violence, hatred, and violent hatred against the Rohingya beginning as early as 2012. Despite years of warning, Amnesty found the company not only failed to remove violent hate speech and disinformation against the Rohingya, it actively spread and amplified it until it culminated in the 2017 massacre. The timing coincided with the rising popularity of Facebook in Myanmar, where for many people it served as their only connection to the online world. That effectively made Facebook the internet for a vast majority of Myanmar's population. And then, just quoting a bit later in the article, critics, including some of Facebook's own employees, have long maintained that putting more resources toward content moderation and civil society engagement will never truly work. It means Meta is playing whack-a-mole, trying to remove harmful material while its algorithms designed to push engaging content that's more likely to get people riled up essentially work against it. Again, this might sound familiar or a little close to home with some similar criticism and questions about Facebook and other social media platforms' influences on our own recent elections. And I think many of us have heard the term rage bait, or perhaps not, but rage bait refers to social media posts or comments specifically designed to get you mad and make you comment, make you engage. But that engagement itself is a really powerful tool, because that is essentially what, in addition to our data, these social media platforms are selling to their advertisers, because they get to say, we reach this many of users with this much active engagement, this much of the time, pay us this much to advertise on our site. So it is actually in their interest to push content that they know will emotionally engage users, because comments, clicks, even pausing on something as you're scrolling counts as engagement, and that is something that they can sell. So again, what can we do about it? There are a few things. First, for the last few years, again, you may have noticed that if you visit a new website, you get a little pop-up that asks for cookie preferences. To do a quick callback to dark patterns, these often default to accept all cookies, or make it very difficult to select certain cookies, but you do always have the option to only accept necessary cookies to view the site. This alone will not protect your privacy or ensure that you don't see overly curated internet, but it will help. You can also change some of your settings in your own apps. Like with Instagram, for example, you can make your Instagram private, so only approved people can look at what you post. There are actually different Instagram feed options too, if you're not aware. So you can go from a feed, the default feed actively pushes some of the people you follow and a lot of things that they want to like promote to you, as well as advertisements. But you can select an option where you're only looking at a feed that is the people that you follow. And there's also an option where you can mark follower content creators as favorites, and then you are only seeing that feed as well. You do have to, I'm pretty sure, select it every time you go into the app, but you do have that option if you want to kind of like limit yourself in that way. You can also go into your settings and you can create a sleep mode. You can set daily limits for yourself at Instagram, and under the account option, you can customize a number of things, including what data Meta is allowed to use to advertise to you or to push content to you. You can customize those things, and you can do the same things in Facebook under settings and privacy. And kind of surprisingly, it's not pushed to you or super easy to get to, but once you get to those privacy settings, it's like surprisingly kind of like transparent and informative how it tells you what your actual options are and what it does to select them. You can also look for browser extensions that help protect privacy, or even better, you can use a search engine or even a browser that doesn't track you or try to advertise to you, like DuckDuckGo, which is free to download and use. You can also choose to like try not to let yourself be rage baited. While I think it is ultimately the responsibility of these tech companies to not be exploitative, and there have been efforts here and there to hold tech companies responsible for perpetuating misinformation and rage baiting, engagement farming. And in my opinion, absolutely, you should ask your politicians to make this something to care about and advocate for. But in the meantime, things being as they are, we can ourselves choose not to fall for it, or at least try not to. I know it might seem like you're making a difference by commenting on something ignorant or that you disagree with online, but the truth is that might not even be a real person you're responding to. It could be a bot or an employee whose job it is to rage bait into engaging, called engagement farming. And even if it is a real person, like, ask yourself if random comments from strangers is the true path to enlightenment. Like, do you think that person is really going to learn something from your comment, no matter how thoughtfully written or like sourced it is, which I'm sure it will be? You know, and ask yourself how many times your own mind was changed by an internet comment. And like, maybe the answer is not never. Maybe the answer is 1 or 2 times I actually did read a thoughtfully written comment that changed my mind. But compare that to like a real conversation with like a real person in the flesh. As far as like the impact that has on you. So as hard as it is, and believe me, I know, I'm absolutely confessed to having written comments on the internet when something made me mad, and thought I've got the perfect response that no one has ever thought of before, and this is definitely going to change this person's mind. Maybe just try not to do that. And if you really can't let it go, if you're just like, and again, I totally relate, if you're just like, I'm so fired up about this thing someone said on the internet, find like a friend, or like go find your partner or like a family member and tell them about the thing on the internet that you read that made you mad and what you would have said, and let them say, yeah, good point, sweetie. And I guarantee like 99% of the time that's probably going to make you feel better than writing that comment and then getting like notifications for the next few days of like likes and then like weird responses to your comment. So we've talked about dark patterns. We talked about data privacy, mostly in the mode of like how we engage with content on the internet. So I want to wrap up this talk on a bit of a philosophical note, if you all will indulge me. And I want to ask a question. What is the purpose of technology?
Convenience.
Yeah, okay, convenience, great. Anyone else want to like +1 that or add something to that?
Initially, it was supposed to connect people, not isolate people.
Yeah. Yeah, it was supposed to do the exact opposite, right? Connect us to a larger community of people than what was available to us and broaden our perspectives. Yeah, it's supposedly to make our lives easier and to broaden our horizons. But I would push a little further too and say convenience or to make our lives easier for what purpose? What? Heck yeah. Yes, I feel that. Yeah, to make certain tasks easier. But if we're spending less time shopping, what do we want to be doing instead? This is the deeper thing I'm trying to get information, yeah, to learn something. Or maybe we want certain things that feel like chores to be easier so that we can devote more time to something that feels like a passion or that we don't feel like we have enough time for. So like theoretically, in this vein, theoretically trains than cars than planes are amazing technologies because they get us farther and farther places faster so that we can enjoy being in those places for longer. So the transportation is the means to get to the joy, not the joy itself. Unless you're like a real freak who likes being on airplanes, which like more power to you. But I think, for most of us, the joy isn't being in the car, being on the drive, being on the plane. It's that it allows us to get to the place. Similarly, with the internet or digital technology, they're meant to be valuable, or we expect them to be valuable to enhance our lives, not to replace our lives, not to become our lives. But it sometimes feels like that's what it has become, doesn't it? I think a lot of us feel that way. I certainly do. That our smartphones aren't enhancing our lives so much as becoming our lives, that our lives are in the phone. They're not getting us to the information that helps us connect in real life through conversation. They have replaced the connection. They are the connection. They're not getting us to the activity. They are the activity. Now again, this talk isn't about AI, but I do think this is illustrative of the point that I'm making. So I've already mentioned at the beginning of this talk the fact that the Google AI overview has accuracy errors and questioning its usefulness. But of course, the AI overview is not unique in this area. AIs are trained on existing information, so AI art necessarily steals from existing art, and AI summaries take from various sources, some using paid reporters and trusted journalists techniques, and some not, just popular sites that are someone's opinion. And what AI does, and what a lot of digital technology does, is it collapses those things. It equates them. It makes them similar sources. It draws no distinction and gives you just a hodgepodge summary of information from all these different types of sources, and doesn't say, this is more trustworthy because of X, this is more trustworthy because of Y. It just says, here's some answers based on a bunch of things that we just crawled for various reasons that we're not making transparent to you. And thus it encourages you, me, us, the user, to not think about that kind of thing as much anymore. The source of the information, how it's being sourced, where it's coming from, how it's being verified. Critical thinking collapses into this soup of just all information is equal. And the premise of AI, similarly, is supposedly, as far as convenience goes, that it will do the mundane for us so that we can focus on higher things. And yet, if this is the case, why are we asking AI to make art for us, or generate actresses, or write scripts? But I would go even further, personally. There's a saying about AI art, something to the effect of, I don't want my AI to make art for me so that I can do laundry. I want it to do laundry for me so that I can do art. But I would go even further than that, and ask, where does art come from? Doesn't it sometimes come from the mundane, from experiencing what's boring? To go back to an earlier point about polarization, how can we connect if we cease to have common experiences, and what experiences are more common than the little everyday things? And are we so desperate to stop living, that we want to just outsource all of these things. Like, not to go too far in the other direction, because yes, I agree. Like, we shouldn't have to be, rolling stones up hills, these days, or it's nice to be able to call my family in California, or even FaceTime with them. But I do think rolling back to some of these really fundamental questions about what do we actually want to use these for? What are they helping us do? What are we doing instead as a result of the things that this has made easier? Or has it just made all this stuff so easy that this is all we're doing? It's just this easy stuff, doom scrolling, and just handing our data away. We can work with machines and technology. We can view machines as valuable partners in our growth as humans. I think we should. I wouldn't work in technology or web development if I didn't believe that, if I was like a complete technology skeptic. But we can do that without viewing ourselves and each other as machines. And I know it can feel a little hopeless sometimes that this technology, this stuff just keeps moving along, pushed by rich and powerful companies, whether we like it or not. But I promise you that many, many designers think like I do, that they truly do want to make the internet and their technology products actually useful for people, and don't want to trap them in dark patterns. Many of the examples and summaries about dark patterns you find on the web are actually on websites made by designers for other designers, like I said, telling them don't do this. This is not how you make good user experience. And by viewing emotion not as things to be exploited in design for profit, but as things to be accommodated, things to be sensitive to. Like as designers, we're better able to view our products in the light of whether they're actually adding value to the world and people's lives, whether we're the helpers that Mr. Rogers calls us to be or not, whether we're doing more harm than good. And if we're not making things that make things better, maybe we can have those hard conversations with ourselves and our design teams to go in a different direction and to not lose sight of our souls as designers and technologists. And similarly, us as users of technology can advocate for legislation of our own, legislation that serves our needs as consumers of technology and that protect our privacy. We can educate ourselves and stay vigilant when we're online to protect our own data and not fall for common dark patterns. And we can remember that we are actually using what we are actually using these tools for. Reconnect to our North Star as far as what we would rather be doing instead of be on the internet. And maybe even start to use these tools a little bit less. And maybe use those phones to find a local bowling league, perhaps. That's it. Thanks so much. I just briefly shout out to Richmond Public Library, as well as again to David Dylan Thomas. His book, Design for Cognitive Bias, is a great book that you can actually get from Richmond Public Libraries via ebook or e-audiobook. It's technically kind of designed for designers, but it's really accessible. He's a very engaging writer. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff at all or getting a behind the scenes look, that's a great resource as well.